Webinar started. All right, we got participants rolling in. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the first ever Storylane webinar. Very exciting. We're going to give people a few minutes to get in here before we really kick things off. To everyone who's joined so far, if you could do me a favor and help me make sure the chat works, if you could drop your name in the chat where you're calling in from, would be great to see where everyone is dialing in from. Hi, Colin. And yeah, just make sure that you're chatting to everyone instead of just hosts and panelists. Hi, Rohit. Hi, Scott. Hi, Ryan. Hi, Jeffrey. Hi, Nina. Hi, John. Hi, Tim.
Oh, hey, Tim Hammond. I know Tim Hammond.
I'm Shauntle from New York. Wow, people are calling in from everywhere. Luca from Vienna. I didn't know you're from Vienna.
It's a global audience here.
Wow. I studied abroad in Vienna. It's one of my favorite places. Oh my gosh, wow, really global, totally. From everywhere. Good to see you all.
Sunny Toronto. All right.
Sunny Toronto. Awesome.
Ranja in Denmark. That's cool. I was in Copenhagen for a couple years ago now, but it was one of my favorite cities.
I've never been. I want to go.
I love Utah.
Yeah, Utah's
Wow.
amazing too. What's your favorite place in Utah, Akash?
Oh, of course, yeah. The Yellowstone side of things, yeah.
Yeah, cool. All right, we're 2 minutes in. Looks like we've had a bunch of folks join us, so I think we can get started. Quickly just welcome everyone. We're so excited to be here. This is our first ever webinar at Storylane. I'll introduce everyone real quick, but just for housekeeping purposes, please, if you have questions throughout, you can drop them in the chat or you can use the Q&A functionality. We're going to look at both as we go through, and we'd love to field questions in real time. So yeah, please feel free to ask them if you got them. With that, Matt, please introduce yourself.
Awesome. Thank you, Shauntle. Hey, guys. My name is Matt Slaughton. I'm super excited to be here today with the Storylane team. I am based in Atlanta, Georgia. And yeah, I guess right now I'm a principal solution architect for Kasten by Veeam, focused on our strategic cloud native and channel partner relationships.
Akash, over to you.
Well, thanks, everyone. And I'm Akash Bansal, co-founder of Storylane. We let sales and marketing teams build and share interactive demos with their prospects. And over the last 3 years, we have grown to 700 customers. All of your love is showing up here. And I can see quite a few of the participants here are essentially Storylane users. So excited to have all of you here. And this is our first ever webinar, and we'll continue this journey as we go forward, a regular set of webinars. So thank you all.
Yeah, great to see everyone here. I'm Shauntle. My whole career has been in B2B SaaS marketing, and I was actually an early Storylane customer. So Akash and I go way back, like multiple years. And I'm super excited to be part of the go-to-market team at Storylane now. So we're actually going to kick this webinar off with a poll because we're talking a lot about different use cases for interactive demo software. So we want to get a sense of how you all are using interactive demo software today. Okay, the poll is launched. You should all be able to see it. The question is, in which ways are interactive demos fueling your company growth? Is it for driving prospect conversion, customer onboarding and adoption, sales enablement, tech and reseller partners? And if there's something else that's not on the list, feel free to click other and drop in the chat the way in which you're using it that's not on the list. Awesome. Wow, we have a bunch of answers.
Super interesting. Yeah, definitely. These use cases will be really good to understand from the audience here, and yeah, definitely can help Akash and I make sure that we cover them all.
And yes, there will be a recording of the session after the call. Just saw that question. Okay, cool. I'm going to give it 10 more seconds on the poll, and then I'll show you all what the results are. Looks like we're good to go here, basically. Okay. All right, sharing the results. I think everyone can see We have 63% of you are using it for prospect conversion, 47% for customer onboarding, 58% for sales enablement, and 14% for tech and reseller, and then 12% for other. We have training and storyboarding workflows in the chat, so that's super helpful. And help center articles, amazing. Akash and Matt, what do you think about these results?
Well, this is very much in line with what we see when we talk to our customers. So, well, definitely all of these use cases Storylane covers well. So it's great that we can see users all across the board here.
Yeah, it's great.
Absolutely. I love to see too. I know it was in the chat, but using in documentation, we've definitely in some previous experience, which I'm sure we'll talk about, Akash. But yeah, it's a really good, powerful addition there too. So and it's a good way to kind of cross-pollinate as well. So you can use things for conversion, but also kind of jump users through documentation and kind of handhold them. So that's really cool.
Certainly.
Great. And this is a good segue into our questions for Matt, and we can learn all about how Matt's using it.
Yeah, so well, Matt and I go a fair bit actually. He was really our first enterprise user, and that started with Nutanix way back in 2021. So Matt, I know Nutanix actually was at the forefront of product-led growth and being an enterprise and the kind of complex product you guys have, right? A set of product lines, right? It's very intriguing that you guys started with that model and you called it, I think, Test Drive, right? So would love to hear the story behind Test Drive and where you got inserted and essentially the evolution of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, Akash, it's always a pleasure to see you on screen. And yeah, we'll talk through some of the experiences. But yes, I was fortunate enough you and I were introduced. I think, it was 2021, I think is when we really kind of kicked things off. But prior to that, I guess, looking at that product-led growth approach with Nutanix and Nutanix Test Drive, it started, Nutanix is a company, for those on the call unaware, but Nutanix focuses on hyper-converged infrastructure. So it's, think of it, servers in a data center, but slicker in terms of collapsed storage, compute, kind of network all in one box. I think of it as like kind of Lego blocks. Nutanix is kind of the industry leader in HCI. And at the time, and even today, Nutanix very much is focused on really getting the product in front of the users. It's a very user-friendly product, from a web interface perspective, the UI to manage the infrastructure. We saw a lot of traction kind of, speaking to traditional kind of IT practitioners, particularly around, virtual desktop, as well as server virtualization personas. And really getting the product and the interface, we could see kind of at conferences, that was a big part of my role. We could see kind of the gears turning and eyes lighting up once we got it in the hands of our customers. And we had really good success early on, just, whether it was demos or in conferences, in booth, and kind of getting that, nurturing that kind of, or facilitating that hands-on approach. And, as we matured as a company, and prior to COVID, actually, it was almost prescient, but kind of before that, we were focused on, or one of my main charters was hands-on labs at our .next conference, as well as partner conferences. And it was one of our best attended sessions, right? We had really good attendance, really good engagement. So that was a big part of my job for a number of years, and for leadership, again, kind of prescient, but ahead of COVID, said, hey, look, this is great at conferences, but look, let's open this up to a wider audience. Let's make this available. So it started kind of as an engineering-led initiative. Engineering essentially engineered a solution where we could provision nested Nutanix on top of a public cloud provider. But at the time, at this point, we call it Test Drive 1.0. It was very much heavily focused on that kind of bring your own. So you had to kind of bring your own public cloud subscription. And we kind of saw checkered adoption because essentially, you could log into the My Nutanix portal, you could bring your public cloud subscription, punch it in, and it would spit up the infrastructure. But then there was kind of what's next kind of thing, and the use cases were limited. So that's where my team came in, was to kind of really work. And I'm not going to take all credit; it was definitely myself, but more was people on my team. They were really geniuses in the room, but really engineered a solution around end users' experiences to give the product kind of more teeth and give it kind of real world examples. So a lot of orchestration and layering on top of that digital experience, but also kind of the brokering, right? So provisioning, making sure these nested virtualizations get spun up, virtual infrastructure gets spun up, and also eliminating the need for customers to have to bring their subscription. And we saw wild adoption. We saw really, really good traction that way. And it took off, I think, more than any of us could expect. And then, unfortunately, 2020, COVID hit. And COVID hit, I think, 2 months after we'd gone live with the test drive kind of 2.0 solution. And obviously, there was at that point a necessity to have this product-led growth motion. And we just saw wild adoption, but also really high costs. So Akash, I know kind of where you and I started talking is, so initially, we kind of looked back and said, look, we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on these cloud costs. How can we do this without having the backend infrastructure? My engineering team we were tied up constantly, having to script things and orchestrate these experiences. Where it's, if we could just scrape the interface, we could save costs, we could save time. So initially, it was kind of a pet project on my team. One of my engineers, Sharon, did a fantastic job, but it ended up taking her essentially months to kind of build the front end, because she had to, essentially fake back end and scrape manually and render, using new web frameworks and React and whatnot to kind of build a front end that it wasn't maintainable.
There was all this backend infrastructure along with server provisioning that you had to do, which was essentially test drive, while the desire was there to actually have a test drive which could give a hands-on experience, but truly there was just so much interest in terms of infrastructure setups and engineering that you had to do. And then comes like, okay, this concept of front end, how can we just capture the front end? And that you were trying to essentially innovate in-house, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And to some success, but yeah, to your point though. So yeah, we were able to get it without the backend infrastructure, but yeah, even that, the engineering effort behind that was even larger. So Storylane came around at the perfect time. And that Storylane automated exactly what we were trying to engineer, and in a much quicker and more elegant way, where we can use the plugin in the browser, scrape the interfaces we want, and then focus on overlaying the story, the story in Storylane. So immediate, to us, it was an immediate, why aren't we doing this kind of thing? So I think that's where we started talking to Akash, and it was early days. But that was one thing that we really
when you bring up the phrase story in Storylane, right? It goes back to actually some of the earlier discussions that Nalin and I used to have, and Nalin came up with this idea. Hey, how about we're telling a story? Why don't we call it Story and Lane, right? So that's where the name Storylane, and I love that aha moment that we had that got us going, and then we started looking for like domains, and there we have Storylane. So yeah, shoot ahead. Yeah, well, please.
No, it was all, yeah, it's perfect. It's completely appropriate for the product. And yeah, for my team, it really helped me, number one, just reduce engineering. So number one, just infrastructure costs. Number two, engineering effort. I could let my team focus more specifically on the key things that really needed engineering effort, rather than kind of spread widely, because Nutanix has a, ever-growing product portfolio. And then the ease of use of Storylane by kind of, commoditize, I don't want to say commoditizing, but commercializing this, what we tried to engineer with the plugin. I was able to hand this over to kind of less technical people, maybe more the product managers, even product marketing managers that don't need to know the inner workings or back end or any code, and they could create their own stories. And suddenly we could fan out and then start really distributing kind of efforts, and also helping in terms of lifecycle management. So if you're good with it, Akash, I'd love to share my screen and just kind of show kind of what we did and what test drive looks like.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
And
So
then quick context just for the audience, like the primary use case of what you were doing at Nutanix was for non-customers, right? It's like prospects who need to get their hands into the software, see what it's like before they decide whether or not they want to move forward.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was really, and it pivoted to your point, Shauntle. It was initially, focused on prospect. It was a lead gen effort.
Yeah.
We could obviously, it was a quick way to do kind of email campaigns and engage with those prospects. But it quickly evolved where we actually saw a lot of customers start using it too. That really helped with that cross-sell motion as well. So maybe customers that were using just Nutanix HCI, they could go into Test Drive and actually start using other products. So we kind of organically, started addressing that use case as well. And then we started building experiences towards that.
So Matt, actually, so one thing that was really exciting when we actually started engaging with Nutanix was a test drive button right there. And actually, I talked to the VP of marketing that time and all the folks, and everybody was behind this, right? So it was actually, you were driving so many customers and prospects through this one channel, which was the test drive channel, and there was a bold CTA. There still is, like, it continues to drive a lot of product-led growth at Nutanix through that test drive. Essentially, it takes you to a demo center, if I may, right? Whether you're a customer or a prospect trying to look at a Nutanix solution.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and yeah, if you go to Nutanix's website, you'll see too, to your point, Akash, it's embedded on different product pages. It's organically in there. So you'll see it to the top right on the homepage. But even if you go to just specific products, I think let's go to, I think we've got one in here. You'll see Test Drive essentially on every product page. And it was kind of crawl, walk, run. It was start of like, let's get these products just in front of customers, those that are actually buying or user personas. But then, on the back end, especially with the help of Storylane, with integrations with things like HubSpot or Marketo, Intercom, and then Salesforce, is we were able to tie this all together on the back end as well. And it became a really powerful, from a marketing tooling perspective, and that we could actually get that data and see, hey, which are our most popular experiences. It could actually help drive our investment in terms of what products we wanted to focus on as a company, but also from a selling motion, because we actually had a custom field added in Salesforce where we could actually I could look at a contact and say, hey, has this contact taken a test drive? And that way we could help our sellers frame the conversation correctly. Kind of, do we start at ground zero, or do we assume that the customer or prospect has kind of more hands-on with it, having taken a test drive? And so essentially what my team was responsible for was the platform, building this kind of, front end. And again, it was not as pretty as it is now. So credit to the team. I've since left Nutanix. Like I said, I'm at Kasten by Veeam now. So they've taken this over and rebranded and really run with it. But just to show those that want to see it, we have this catalog offering, we could launch. You put your email in, and it may get upset because I've actually already logged in. So let me go to my pre-cooked version here. This is where I've logged in already. You'll see there's a whole catalog of offerings here. And this is actually a mix. That was one thing that we did working with you, Akash, was we've got a mix of kind of the thick test drive experiences, which are provisioning things in that public cloud provider, as well as that was another project I had, was moving that back on premises with Nutanix infrastructure, but still doing the orchestration. Each experience would take 45 minutes to 90 minutes to provision, sometimes longer, actually, depending on the experience. Whereas obviously with Storylane, it's instantaneous, but we were able to kind of overlay them or intermix them. So as an example, if I click on, I think earlier I register for NDB, which is their Nutanix's database kind of platform management solution. This is a thick test drive experience. You can see here, you're using a different digital adoption tool. You can run through that, but again, this would take a long time to provision. I had to write a whole proxy in Nginx to serve this up and auto log people in. Whereas in contrast, we have this Citrix one, which Citrix in itself was harder to show because being Nutanix, we couldn't license and provision Citrix infrastructure. So being a partner, which we'll get into probably a little bit more in my current role with Kasten and Veeam, this was a really powerful tool where, again, it's intermixed from the solution catalog, but you can see here we're using Storylane. And, it's a very kind of natural experience. We're still in the interface, but we quickly jump amidst interfaces where you can actually see. So here we're in a Citrix interface. Now we show a desktop interface. So again, something that from an engineering perspective would have been insurmountable before. Storylane basically, dissolved all of those complexities and let us kind of inherently and integrate it into our catalog within Test Drive.
Essentially, you were able to bring in a mix and match different experiences together and have that continuity, right? Like SaaS set of screens, like which were on really a web application versus a desktop application, and show that continuity. And I really like that you have this main menu, which is essentially brings up a table of contents, a menu of contents, which users can go through and choose their own adventure, right? That's and I remember you telling me, right, that aha moment again, where when you saw this feature being launched, you said, hey, this is great, right? This because earlier we used to have just one flow. Now there's a multi-flow option for any prospects that are coming in.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, that was one thing too, from the outset. So the aha moment of like, why aren't we doing this today? So we obviously got on board with Storylane with you, Akash, but also the responsiveness of you, your engineering team. So, we, as we were building these, I know you and I would be, I was probably your least favorite person for a minute there, but I would be sending emails or reaching out. And the turnaround for certain things like templating and formatting, I think you guys turned around in 1 or 2 sprints really quickly. And it really helped my team, right? Because, you think of from a marketing perspective, technical marketing, we're still marketing. So we need to make sure that our colors match and all that. So, features like that you were able to quickly incorporate the product really enabled us, and it also provided us kind of with that warmth of support from Storylane, which definitely gave us more confidence.
Yeah, great. And also, we actually lately have been working with the teams, right? Where like now I know there used to be a chat integration. So you brought up integration. So we are really big on integrations, and having a chat interface like this integrated into your Storyline experience is huge, because that essentially allows any prospect to ask a question and sales to jump in, right? And then in context, be able to answer their questions and get them engaged right away.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think if I had to, for the audience, if I had to say one thing that Storylane really helped us do with Test Drive and in general was just remove friction even more. And it's friction on the back end, again, from the engineering perspective, but also the front end. Like you said, with the kind of the context-based chat, again, we kind of, there's I always used to see, I'll use it again, but the Tom Petty quote was that, don't bore, skip to the chorus. I feel like, Storylane and Test Drive really is in that motion of, let's get out of the way. Let's let our prospects and existing customers get hands-on with it. And then they come to us with more thoughtful questions. And our sellers loved it because it was a great, even ahead of meetings or on the back end of meetings, they could leave them with these experiences. And then the customers, they could present on it. Let's say it's on the back end of the experience. The customer could then in their own time go and then come back for, the second or third meeting and have kind of more specific questions, or we can help to accelerate or remove that friction in the selling process.
There's a question in the chat that's relevant to what you're talking about right now, which is, are you using Storylane as a sandbox feature for prospects? So I think if I were to interpret that question, it's like, you obviously have the demos on the site for prospects who are maybe haven't taken a sales call yet, but then they might want access to a demo instance like after their first sales call, and that they might want that to be like a little bit more robust. Are you using Storylane for that as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think, and kind of transitioning to kind of what the short time I spent at Checkmarx, which is a different organization, but another one that we brought Storylane on, that was actually the primary thing that we were doing. And I think they are still continuing to do is both as a selling tool, as a leave behind, but also to your point, kind of as a sandbox, is we could actually help qualify leads as they came through into the free trial, right? So we had a much smaller team at Checkmarx. So I wasn't able to engineer nearly the solution that I could at Nutanix. So as a result, we could front end the free trial with a Storylane and say, run through this first, make sure this makes sense to you or that you care about this product. And then we could then see and say, hey, this has kind of been a pre-qualified opportunity. Let's now spend the efforts and spin up a cloud instance for you to test out. So yeah, definitely really useful from a sandbox perspective.
And actually, I've seen a lot of teams using Storylane for that perspective, because the zero state that a user lands in when they sign up with a free trial is a very hard one, right? And sometimes products like Checkmarx, where it's a security product, cannot have any of the data, right? So you have to integrate your systems and such. So you have a fully populated instance that a user can go through and click around. And another feature that Storylane offers is basically the click-through, right? Without the guide. So you can really feel like you're navigating the product, not just a guided tool, but otherwise as in a clickable tool.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, Akash, because we're actually looking at that use case right now at Kasten by Veeam, where it's yeah, we can, I know we actually had a call recently onboarding, because like I said, we've just brought on board a Kasten, but yeah, we can, in this case, I've minimized, or I don't have the X's available in this checkmarks demo, but yeah, just giving a sandbox and we can click through and kind of preload these pages. And again, it gives that kind of, more freedom of choice, but then we can also get customers quickly back on the rails. And that was a big problem also, going back to Storylane and kind of our thicker test drive experiences, is we'd often have prospects, what we say, fall off the rails, where we're using that other digital adoption product. If they clicked elsewhere, that was something that we really liked about test drive, but at the same time, depending on who was taking it, the persona, or what they were doing, sometimes they would just get lost. And obviously Storylane can really help. I kind of equated it to bumper bowling, where we can kind of, customers can still bowl, you can still knock down the pins, but it's much easier to get back on those rails or stay in your lane, I guess, to keep that more, that metaphor going.
Great, yeah. So Matt, let's switch up a little bit, and what I want to get to is what over this life cycle, right? You have been actually at 3 companies using Storylane, right? So what are some of the key like features in Storylane as it evolved that you really have come to love?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I think number one, ease of use is, that, again, I don't know if we can call that a feature. That's more just the product itself. But yeah, the Chrome plugin absolutely just made it really easy, to help support that. We were able to kind of quickly spin out guides for kind of a larger audience at Nutanix and then at Checkmarks as well. Like, look, this is how you get started. This is how you kind of create these. And again, really useful for, again, not to, product marketing managers that maybe aren't as technical or don't know scripting or code can still create these experiences. Definitely the templating. Again, like I said, working in technical marketing, it was still marketing. So making sure that we had a unified experience, complied with marketing and branding standards, but also gave customers or prospects using the test drives or the Storylanes kind of that consistent experience across. And then also, we brought it up earlier, but with the menu there, the guided, I think that's a really powerful tool. It lets customers can kind of skip forward if they want. They can reference or go back. That's really useful as well. And I'm going to throw one more in there too, which I've been kind of playing around with recently. But one really powerful aspect of the tool is because it scrapes. If you do the HTML capture, and it actually captures the HTML, we've used it to kind of manipulate or help with, from a roadmap perspective. You can essentially set up a proof of concept. Using Storylane, whereas, obviously a lot of product managers use other tools like, Figma or whatnot, but Storylane kind of gives that additional interactivity, or we can align our demos to what we know is coming in the product. So that's definitely something, a really powerful feature that I like. So sorry, I gave you 4 answers there, Akash, but those are probably the top things that we used.
That's great. And actually, as you were answering, I could clearly picture how at different stages of the funnel, you're able to have Storylane as an experience right from the early journey of the prospect, top of funnel, through as you go mid-level, more into the educational piece and understanding, and then finally like more at the POC stage as well, right? So each of those actually is something that there's something for each of the GTM or go-to-market folks at the companies that start using Storylane.
Absolutely. Yep. And relevant, but I see in the chat too, there was a question around, registration experience. So it looks like, Kevin Brown is asking, was that a Nutanix thing or Storylane? So Nutanix, we did build that kind of authentication to get the token, but Storylane also has the lead capture capability, which we're hoping to actually leverage. We're still getting plumbed up with our systems here as again, we're just getting on board here at Kasten by Veeam. So you have the ability to capture lead and talk about marketing funnels. You brought up Akash, really beneficial there. And that it's not required, but the capability is there already built into Storylane. You don't necessarily need to build the whole wrapper like we did around Test Drive. It's already set up within Storylane today in a sense.
Yeah, and people ask us actually a lot about how do you blacklist certain IPs, certain emails or domains, and that's something that actually you can potentially also do, right, with our integration with the whole marketing and CRM stack. So that actually has been a very loved feature, and together with like some of the other insights with our integrations like Clearbit, we have been able to bring about like more visibility into who's viewing, which companies are viewing, even without a lead capture form. So those are some real good, exciting things that have come about last few months.
Absolutely.
Can we quickly talk through, there are two questions that I want to get to before we move on. One is from Anand. Did you see any marked improvement in conversion from the homepage or upsell from inside the product at Nutanix? And how do you think it's different using videos versus Storyline?
So yes, absolutely saw marked improvement in conversion and lead conversion, and it gave us a bit better visibility from MQL to SAL, so sales qualified or accepted leads. So be able to measure that a lot more. We definitely saw, I'm trying to remember the percentage, it's been a couple of years now, but I think something like easily over 30% improvement over kind of just traditional, flat product pages. I don't have, it's kind of apples to oranges a little bit for video conversion. A lot we did at Nutanix as well as at Checkmarks was just kind of ungated YouTube. So it was a little bit harder for us, from a campaign perspective. And I'm sure if there's Nutanix marketing folks in the call, they will probably want to strangle me because I'm sure there are campaigns that did measure that. But I know from my seat, I didn't have the numbers in terms of seeing conversions from videos, whereas I could actually witness real time, in case of Storylane or Test Drive, how that converted. So yeah, definitely saw much better conversion in our funnel. And again, I think it just kind of helped from a qualification perspective. Somebody that's willing to interact, with it is probably the persona that you want to target. Whereas videos, a lot of times it's hard to sit down, we're all busy and it's hard to sit down and hit play and listen to somebody talk at you. So I guess, and to that end, thank you for everybody for attending, because that's kind of what I'm doing right now is talking at them. So if we could turn this into a storyline, we could make my mouth move or something and they could skip the
Eventually that will come. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. That's the next, that's AI right there.
AI that we have at our disposal. I think that's coming. Yes.
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay, then last question. In your experience, which use case benefits the most from Storylane? And for people who are going to introduce interactive demo software to their company for the first time, like how should they position that in terms of KPIs? Obviously, we've talked about prospects. We've talked about in the sales cycle. We haven't really talked about the partner use case yet, or even customer enablement, but you've obviously worked through all of those 4 use cases. So yeah, curious to hear your take.
Yeah, in terms of different use cases. So one thing that also quickly, we realized we talked about, initially we were targeting prospects. We quickly saw existing customers were using it just to educate themselves, but also internal enablement, which you mentioned, Shauntle. That was huge, right? So, and again, kind of being able to leverage the existing Storylanes we created. So, initially something that we created for prospects, we could then take to our sales force and have our reps and SEs kind of, again, is kind of step one. They could start with Storylane and get their feet wet or your hands dirty, and then we can move on to kind of more sales enablement. So that's definitely another use case. We started leveraging it at Nutanix. We started embedding it in an internal training, and then Checkmarks. I know Checkmarks, they're using the product Storylane, but they're actually using it, I believe, more internally than externally today. So we were embedding things in blogs and whatnot, but we honestly used it more as an internal enablement tool, just because in the case of Checkmarks, and some to the same extent at Nutanix, Checkmarks they are pivoting, right? Their product is fundamentally changing from an on-premises to a SaaS offering, and kind of helping to bootstrap the sales force globally is a tall task, right? So by being able to do that using Storylane, it was huge, and having that unified experience across sales forces.
Yeah, actually, you bring up an interesting one, the sales enablement piece, and how during this transition, sales actually can still pivot from like a desktop kind of product to a more SaaS-based offering, and show that continuity to all the customers as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And again, kind of skipping ahead here, but something that I was keen to bring in my new role here as an architect within Cast by Veeam is I'm focused on partnerships, and really, we kind of talked about briefly with the Citrix example, but be able to kind of move seamlessly across a lot of our ISV or Alliance partner products and our product is invaluable, right? So again, it's kind of one of those things of like, how do I show this? From an engineering perspective, it gets very complicated, security, right? We can't just provide unfettered access to a cloud account. Whereas, with Storylane, it's seamless. It's part of the demo. And we often augment with videos, right? So I know the earlier question came up where we might, oftentimes when I'm creating content, I'll create a Storyline and then I'll also create an accompanying video. And part of that is, one, to reinforce, two, I've already built the demo environment to, feed the Storylane in the video. So, might as well leverage that effort. But 3 is just the, different personas want to consume content differently. So that was a big takeaway I had at Checkmarx, actually, stepping one step back. But in terms of videos versus blogs versus interactive demo, we found a lot of kind of younger generation, younger developers would prefer videos, whereas a little bit older generation, and we had this segmented down. And again, it's been a minute, so I can't remember the specific age brackets. But we saw, a little bit older developers, more senior developers prefer blogs, and which to me makes sense because if you're doing code, you can copy and paste. But really trying to cater to those target personas, how they want to best consume it, and having that kind of multimedia approach, Storylane, and having those interactive demos was key to that as well.
And then finally, it comes down to how much closer you want to get to the product, right? Having an interactive demo is as close to the product you can get without really signing up for the product and offering a fully provisioned instance or a view of the product, right? So
this is such a good question in the chat. How much effort for implementation based on use case or type of company? So as you switch from company to company or use case to use case, how does the effort vary? I can imagine dramatically.
Yeah, it's so I guess from a Storylane perspective, it's removed the friction from an engineering perspective significantly. So across the board, when I'm building a Storylane demo, this is a big feature I use to sell it internally. As we've brought to more, as I've brought it here, and then also at Checkmarx was, look, I could actually build a Storylane demo in, usually a 10 to 15 step demo I could build, in Storylane in under an hour. Which is unheard of, right? We talk about engineering; it would take weeks for us to do that. Nutanix using the thick kind of provisioned virtual infrastructure. So I think from the Storylane side, I say it's pretty similar across organizations. The most effort is kind of getting the demo environments ready. It's almost the same issue that we have for the videos, right? Is making sure that I've got everything lined up ready. If I'm doing multi-cluster, like here with Kasten, want to show multi-cluster migration, making sure I have my 2 clusters up and my workload's ready and it's clean and I don't have my name in it, because that's a common thing that I've been caught out before. But that's another thing, going back to Storylane, being able to manipulate HTML, it helps save some of that time. There's been times where I've been mid demo and it's shoot, I've named this one thing Slotin that I can't rename without reprovisioning. Is with Storylane, I can go, edit the HTML and replace that. And
no code.
Or very basic HTML, or change colors. That's the other thing too. Like I said, maybe I know Checkmarx, because it's a SaaS offering, oftentimes they would do UI updates, and rather than have to re-record a whole video, we could go to the specific screen and I could make the HTML match what was pushed in the product.
Great, yeah. Matt, so you have been in organizations like Nutanix, Veeam, Checkmarx, right? So what does it if you're inserting Storylane, what does it take for the whole team to be successful with Storylane, right? Well, how do you work across teams to spread that message and educate all the folks you have to take along so that really everybody is focused on it and gets to delivering Storylane experiences quickly to customers from the time they sign up with Storylane?
Yeah, great question. I think it's both a technical and functional question. And I think, this is something I'm constantly working on. You talked about Nutanix as kind of democratizing, creating these demos, is removing my team or myself out of the equation. That's key, right? So not being the single point of failure or the choke point, be able to distribute that. That's kind of step one, is just, so Storylane obviously helps us do that by simplifying, essentially not eliminating, but all but removing the engineering effort. But 2 is, just building simple things, but just quick guides, right? So, having a wiki. We built one at Nutanix, built one at Checkmarx, and building one now. That's, this is a quick start guide. What's the top level? Hey, 5 points for somebody to get started. Get them provisioned access in Storylane and kind of let them go. So we almost kind of do a pre-Storylane internally. So it's we give them hands-on with the product. Let the product marketing, product folks work with it, engineers work with it, and then come back and ask more pointed questions. But then also we talk about templating. making it really easy where we can say, hey, look, use the Nutanix template, or, use the checkmarks template. That way, you don't have to go and have to manually apply colors or fonts or what have you. It's out of the box. It's pretty much ready to go. And one thing we're hoping to start leveraging, actually came up on a call today, so very relevant. I haven't leveraged it yet, Akash, but I know it's a new capability, is leveraging the variable features in Storylane, working with partners. We have some partners that want to co-brand with us, and Storylane makes that really easy, as well as being able to kind of leverage that capability and catering to more use cases, right? So, talk about more success within the organization is, working with my channel sellers and saying, hey, look, all you have to do is replace this and insert vendor name here, and it'll swap the logo out. So definitely kind of making it adaptable across use cases is definitely a huge key to success as well.
Yeah, I like that reusability that you mentioned, right? Using just a standard set of templates, you can enable your entire sales force and partners, right? Being able, having merge fields and just quickly bring it about, just making it happen. Yeah. Well, I know we have about 5 more minutes. Matt, so in terms of learnings, right? As you were going through your Storylane experiences and uptake in the different organizations, were there moments where it didn't seem to move the needle, as in like your teams were having a difficult time? Is there anything to watch out for during the whole implementation process, during the uptake from the teams?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a couple gotchas, and it's one of those things is, the same, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So just making sure that you're using the tool, as it's intended to be used. Not to say you shouldn't get creative or leverage, different capabilities, because I know Storylane, there's HTML record, then there's the quick record that essentially just grabs screen caps. But there are certain cases that just don't lend themselves, we found, to necessarily using Storylane as opposed to maybe a more traditional medium. So I think making sure you kind of tease those out, but at the same time also not being afraid to get creative. So that was one thing. And again, I know you helped us out early on, Akash. Was we reached a point where it's, said, I think that Citrix was that example that we showed, which is like, how do we show a desktop? And it didn't even occur to us that, oh, you can take a screenshot and then upload it in a Storylane. And, for the end user, yes, they can't interact with it like a Windows desktop, but it still serves the same function of what we were trying to achieve. So, I think in terms of specific pitfalls, it's just, like I said, I think especially kind of in the fields that I've worked in or that I work in now, where there's a lot of command line, sometimes that doesn't necessarily lend itself as well to Storylane, where, maybe Storylane's better suited. You can do it, but it's, better suited for pretty UI and
find it as a video in that case. Yeah, right. So
exactly. And then let's see, I do see a question. Sorry, and Shauntle, I'm stealing some of your thunder, but there's a question from Deepak. Can you build or replace a self-help documentation using Storylane? Is that what I did at Checkmark? So we definitely did not replace help documentation, because so we embedded Storylane in some of the documentation. I don't know if it's still there today or not. They're constantly innovating and constantly kind of changing some of the things they're doing. But yeah, we definitely would use it to augment. At the end of the day, especially for technical things, sort of find and replace or searching documentation is huge. But we could really kind of underscore and say, hey, look, this is really the documentation, but also here's the Storylane embedded. And I actually wanted to show one quick example of that if I can. I should get to that. I know we're running out of time, so I'll be quick. But this is actually just went live with one of our key partners at Red Hat. So Red Hat is a key strategic partner for Kasten. We've got this lab for Red Hat sellers, and you'll see here what we do is we've engineered at pre-stages of the environment, but I've got a Storylane embedded directly kind of in this documentation. We can say take a tour, and it actually pops up in the page. We don't send them elsewhere. And essentially the Red Hat sellers can see what we've automated for them, but also see, hey, look, this is how easy it is. I think we did it in 24 steps. And I know Akash had mentioned we can skip ahead too, which is really useful, or I can close out. And I can jump ahead that way.
Well, this is very crafty. Yeah, good. So I know we are almost out of time.
There's one last question that kind of I think would be good for Matt, which is, well, it's for Akash, but also for Matt, any instances where Storylane demos have helped companies go PLG? I feel like that happened with Nutanix.
It certainly, yeah. I mean, it certainly accelerated at Nutanix our product led growth. I mean, like I said, I think kind of we had started that motion already with kind of thick test drive, but yeah, the ability to quickly spin out additional experiences for different products, that definitely helped us go PLG. I think, yeah, similarly at Checkmarks, that was something we had a free trial offering, but we didn't have the engineering resources there to kind of really build out things around that. So kind of what we did is start pivoting towards using Storylane. To kind of, I don't want to say short circuit, but help qualify those leads. I will say, we had a lot of issues with students and kind of people just kicking the tires, and that would cost money. So anyways, yeah, so I'm getting off track, but yeah, that definitely accelerated PLG for sure at Nutanix, and then Checkmarks, and obviously we're hoping to do the same.
For 700 customers that we have, essentially that's a primary use case, right? So all the logos that you see on the Storyline website, including the ones that are not there, all of those are essentially using Storyline for that. Cool. Yeah, it has been wonderful having everybody here. I know we are almost at the end of the webinar. So any closing housekeeping things, Shauntle, for us to dive into?
Only thing is we'll send out a recording by the end of the week, probably, for everyone who joined. So if you want to rewatch, feel free. And I think that's all. Thank you all so much for joining. And thank you, Matt. Thank you, Akash. This was great.
Always a pleasure, guys. Yeah. Really, really enjoyed the time. Always a pleasure hanging out with you guys.
All right.
Thank
Take care, everybody.
It has been lovely being here with all of you.